How to Become a Virgin, a sequel to The Naked Civil Servant by Quentin Crisp. America. Until I went to St. Andrews University in 1975, I had never left England. Before 1977, I had never been outside the British Isles. Now, only 2 crowded years later, I have been to every region of the earth where Crisperanto is understood, except South Africa, which I have never visited because I reckon they are in enough trouble there already. Even so, I am not an experienced traveler. I never shall be, because I so seldom make long voyages alone. The harrowing complexities of airports are usually faced by other people on my behalf. The person who most often shoulders this burden is my agent. When I go to the United States, he makes the trip partly on his own account, seeing America as a bookshelf 3,000 miles wide, but mostly he does so for my sake. I am very grateful. Being my companion in a strange land demands a certain moral fortitude. Wherever we go, people say, looking him slowly up and down, "Ah yes, you're Quentin's personal manager." It might mean anything, but he remains calm and explains that he is a literary agent, not only mine, but that of many other writers. Occasionally, some of my acquaintances sneer at the fact that, like little old ladies of the 1890s, I seem to need a traveling companion. They are rattled by my fecklessness, or more likely, by the condonation that my passivity receives from my employers. "Do you like having your mind made up for you by others?" they snort. "Don't you care that you are being treated like a dog, told when to sit and when to follow at your master's heels?" I remain unperturbed by their indignation. The treatment upon which they spit, their scorn, is not something I merely accept. I connive at it. It ensures that I am never to blame. To anyone whom the world has for so long tried to make feel ashamed, this is a great relief. When I was a child, my ineptitude was a burden to my parents and my teachers. They could not see that it was a greater burden to me. I wondered wanly if I would ever discover how to do anything well. At long last I have learned something even better, how not to do anything at all. This pampered mode of travel serves not only my own purpose, but also that of anyone who employs me. One evening, during a week in Washington so unsuccessful that it quite put me off wanting to be president, I was taken by my sponsor to supper at the Watergate, no less. During the meal I said, "But the going on the stage and the signing of the books are a pretext, are they not? Really, I'm in the smiling and nodding racket." Without a moment's hesitation, he agreed that I was. That being so, it is my duty, when in the outer world, never to appear worried about trying to decipher what an airport public address system is saying, never to be seen in tears because I have lost my ticket. No one must ever be provoked into saying that he saw me somewhere, but that I looked so distraught that he didn't dare speak to me. To this end, I not only never travel alone, I have even abandoned my lifelong habit of scorning strangers before they have had a chance to scorn me. Now, in public, like everyone else who has been on television, I wear perpetually an expression of fatuous affability. There is a sense in which, however far I go, I shall never be a traveler at all. I shall never return home with a parrot in a cage and fantastic tales of what foreign people and places look like. It is in the very nature of my situation that I traverse the world not to see, but to be seen. My visit to America was given a curious overture. A day came when, seeking new screens to conquer, Thames Television bought 7 consecutive evenings of New York viewing time. Among the items shown was the naked civil servant. I trust it was exhibited on a channel that required no sponsorship. I cannot imagine any manufacturer being willing to advertise his product during the tale of degradation unless the copy were to say, "If you don't eat up your shredded wheat, you'll end up like Quentin Crisp." Whether or not this wild gamble turned out to be profitable for Thames, I have no idea, but it certainly made a difference to me. It foreshadowed the moment when my dream of America became a reality. From the moment that I heard what had happened, I never for long took my eyes from the western horizon. For many months, no invitation to visit the States was received, but an American came to see me. This man was Mr. Lindsay, the former mayor of New York, a position, in my estimation, only just south of God. I remembered from the invasion of Britain by GIs during the war that all Americans are good-looking. Even so, I was amazed by Mr. Lindsay's appearance. He is what television would call a new, improved Mr. Niven. He arrived in Belfort Street at the head of his men, a producer whose nerves were worn down to their stumps by lack of sleep, an Italian cameraman, and a lighting expert who only longed for glasses of Guinness. Mr. Lindsay and I were placed so close together that we must have looked like old-time radio crooners sharing a microphone. The cameraman trudged through a heap of dirty sheets lying in the corner of my room, presumably in the hope of getting far enough away from us to show that we were not embracing. My home affords so little space that, throughout the interview, he was compelled to balance his camera on his sagging collarbone. I could not help wondering if we would be seen in heaving close-up, like the wind-screen shots in a car chase. I was too astonished by the entire incident to remember much of my conversation with my visitor, but I do recall that he asked me if I was planning to go to the States. My reply was another question. What about my sin? To reassure me, my interviewer waltzed casually through a catalogue of names belonging to famous Englishmen who had safely carried their tarnished images across the Atlantic Ocean. But a moment later, perhaps fearing that he had offered too much encouragement, he was warning me that I would have to undertake not to overthrow the government by force. I issued a counter-warning, but have since learned that no one who is not born in America can be president. It seemed to me unlikely that this dialogue would ever be heard in New York, but I was wrong. My spy for that city has since told me that this interview formed part of a program called Good Morning America. That means that it was seen by 11 million people with half-closed eyes. My informant also said that Mr. Lindsay seemed embarrassed. The camera evidently sees more than the eye. At the time of his visit, he seemed to me polite but relaxed, interested but not inquisitive. He personified that effortless sociability that I now know to be the national style of America. If proof were needed that democracy is alive and well and living in America, this entire episode would prove it. Mr. White says that an Englishman is unhappy until he has explained America. I would say that he might feel guilty if he did not praise it. Though, at a first glance, New York is less beautiful than Toronto, less airy, less golden. To me it was more exciting, because it is the city of my dreams. The moment I caught sight of it, I wanted it and stretched my arms through the car window towards the skyscrapers like a child beholding a Christmas tree. Every street along which we drove brought back the memory of some long-dead movie, seen when life was dreary and only the world of celluloid was rich and full. Every person on the sidewalks reminded me of the soldiers who invaded London during the happy time. On this first visit, we were the guests of Mr. Bennet. This was as it should be. He is the very spirit of the place, a jumping up and down man of limitless hospitality who is wild about the entertainment industry. He arranged for us to live for 2.5 days in a splendor to which it would be ruinous to become accustomed. In a hotel suite large enough to house a Catholic family, I was given a bed in which 4 people could have slept without ever being introduced. Everything in America is on the wide screen. Mr. Bennet is the very model of a modern millionaire. That is to say, he dresses for all occasions like a college student. Thus attired, he took me, on my last evening in New York, through various theaters of the Schubert group. There, since he invented a chorus line, he is obviously sacred. The manager of one of these houses walked solemnly before us like a mace-bearer to shoo away any ushers or ticket collectors who might have mistakenly dared to address us. Of all the snippets of entertainment that I sampled in this way, the one that impressed me the most was my glimpse of Mr. Borge. Except that he occasionally plays a few notes on the piano, he does less on stage than I do, but to so much more effect. Finally, my host took me to Sardes. His mode of living is like that of nature herself. He leaves a wide margin for the unexpected. Though there were only 4 invited guests, we sat at a table large enough for a board meeting. Within seconds, this turned out to have been a wise stratagem. We were joined, for a few seconds each, by a series of diners from other parts of the room. Among other celebrities, I was introduced to Mr. von Sydow. He did not look god-ridden. He has a pink face, corn gold hair, and a handshake that could force you to your knees. Either in Mr. Bergman's picture or in Sardes, he was acting. One man who visited our table became highly excited when he saw me. "Oh," he cried, glancing rapidly from me to Mr. Bennet and back again, "is there going to be a collaboration of some kind?" Mr. Bennet explained that this was a secret. From somewhere a quiet voice murmured, "Then why are you in Sardes?" Throughout every meal, because of all this darting to and fro, the waiters never enjoy a clear run from the tables to the kitchen. With their trays held high above their heads, they move, stop, start again, like 6 o'clock traffic on Brooklyn Bridge, except that there are no tantrums and no collisions. In Sardes there is more waving, more squeaking, more embracing than anywhere else on earth. An English restaurateur would find some way of putting a thin-lipped stop to all this hectic conviviality. If he did not, his staff would leave. This is the very heart of the difference between the British and the American way of life. The English actually want their jobs to be boring so that they can strike. They wish their friends to be dull so they need not feel inferior to them. New Yorkers, on the other hand, strenuously resist all tendencies to reduce people and events to their lowest common factor. Many years before I ever dreamed that I would one day visit the United States, a friend wrote to me saying, "Over here, everyone is rich and everyone is handsome." This is true, but it is not all. My correspondent omitted to add that everyone is eager. This is, to me, by far the most important attribute of Americans. They want to speak, they want to listen, and they will endure quite a lot of inconvenience to prevent the color from being drained out of experience. They like people to be unusual in any way they know how. Even being foreign will do. Visiting Englishmen they adopt as pets and coo at them as though they were budgies that can nearly speak American. For the same reason, they worship actors who, to civilians, are the very icons of that instant success, the notion of which even the most downtrodden waif never wholly relinquishes. If a man who was once a farm boy becomes a senator, people are quietly pleased, but the metamorphosis has been a lengthy, even a daunting process, and no one is still around who can vividly describe those early straw-nibbling years. If, however, someone is in a soap advertisement one year, and the next is playing the lead in a Technicolor, widescreen, first feature, everyone, even little children, can bear witness to the miracle. In the shriveled hearts of the English, such an event, if it ever occurred, would arouse only envy, but in America it would inspire hope. On the morning of my departure from New York, Mr. Bennet, who had become aware of my infatuation with his native land, came to the hotel and presented me with a large American flag. All the way back to Heathrow, I wore it as though it were my college scarf. Perhaps this was an act of treason. If accused, I would have pled invincible ignorance. Had I died on the way home, I should have been extremely put out at the time. But later, looking down from my cloud, I would have been content. The purpose of that first visit to the Islands of the Blessed was so that Mr. Bennet might cast an eye over me and my agent. He wished to buy the stage rights of The Naked Civil Servant. In the end, for reasons that were veiled from me, an option on my autobiography was sold to Mr. Elkins, an impresario so famous that a book called The Producer has been written about him. When, the following year, I again crossed the Atlantic, it was in order that I might begin to work for him. The nearest I can come to describing the nature of this new employment is to mention I once said that of any event my agent would demand to know if there was any money in it, but Mr. Elkins would merely ask, "How often will my name be mentioned?" With this prognosis, they both agreed. I have recently been involved in such a whirlwind courtship of the universe that I cannot now remember whether I initially met my American employer before or after my first visit to New York. I seem to have become aware of his existence gradually from oblique murmurs issuing from my agent's lips. Like Mr. Cook, who took me to Australia, Mr. Elkins was once an actor. When I asked him why he had become an impresario, he said that it was the only thing that he knew how to do. From this we may infer that promotion is where actors go when they die. I asked the question because, indirectly, I was learning what an uneasy, even hazardous, profession being an entrepreneur can become. He has to be in possession of the money, the script, the leading actor, and the right theater all on the same day. Impresarios are frequently asked by televisionaries when some scheme or other first occurred to them. They look at the toe cap of one expensive shoe and murmur dreamily, "I got the basic idea in 1946. I used to think that replies such as this were a joke. Now I know they can be only too true. It is not easy to say whether Mr. Elkins enjoys going to the theater, likes the company of stage people, or is fascinated by the complexities of show business. Even if he adores all these aspects of his profession, it still does not explain why he was so keen to own The Naked Civil Servant. Perhaps the answer is simply that whatever he wants absolutely. When I first met him, he seemed to wish to make my life story into a straight play for presentation in London. Later, to my great relief, the project turned into a musical to be staged on Broadway. I remember saying that I wanted whatever he wanted. His reply was, "In that case, we shall never quarrel." We never did. But in case I appear to be seeking praise for being self-effacing, I must add that, as my agent pointed out, I can only afford to be so nice because he's so nasty. That I always accepted Mr. Elkins' judgment does not mean that I understood him. On the contrary, to this day he mystifies me. He is a small man whose energy is out of all proportion to his bulk, like something dangerous in nuclear physics, and he is made restless by ambition, as another man might be racked by indigestion. Nevertheless, in a life so peripatetic that half of it is spent in the sky, he is a family man, constantly getting married, begetting children, and being visited by his relatives. His appearance is as extreme as his nature. His hair is white, but his eyes are black. As if this did not make them startling enough, he opens them by lowering his lower lid rather than raising his upper lid, and keeps them so wide open that he looks perpetually astonished by the enormity of his commitments. In contrast with him, his newest wife is calm and unusually gentle. Perhaps she is the heart of the hurricane. Once I had become involved in show business, however peripherally, a question arose which I couldn't help asking myself, since I dared not interrogate the people concerned. Why do rich men put their money into theatrical ventures? They cannot possibly be interested in becoming even richer. If that were their aim, they would invest their spare cash in oil or automobiles, or indeed almost anything rather than the stage. Speaking in general terms, I think the answer has to be that angels are interested in girls. I know that on a rainy night, a woman can be pressed into service for a few pence, but in those circumstances, a man's power over the opposite sex is seldom witnessed by his rivals. This may vitiate the sense of triumph. If, however, he allows it to be known that he finances plays, then wherever he goes in public, all women within a radius of half a mile will creep a little closer to him, and with elaborate unconcern will present him with their noble profiles, or worse. With no effort on his part, Mr. Midas can thus surround himself with girls, all of them daring, some of them beautiful, and a few with talent, if anyone cares. Furthermore, at any moment, and there must be many, when the conversation in his club becomes boring, a man in these circumstances can glance at his digital watch and sigh, "I'm afraid I simply must run along and see how my latest show is doing." As he rises from his ragged leather chair, all eyes will turn enviously towards him. All hearts will silently ask the palpitating question, "Does he really know Miss Christie, and if so, how well?" If wealth is thus devoted to the strengthening of an image of masculine desirability rather than squandered on inland revenue, that old whore who will do anything for money, few of us would think it had been unwisely spent. Although I never met any of them, I presume it was with these strange men that Mr. Elkins so feverishly dealt. The smiling and nodding racket has many branches. Chief among these is to be interviewed by televisionaries or on radio programs. For this purpose I went whizzing round the United States. To Boston, to Chicago, where, to my surprise, there was not a glimpse of Edward G. Robinson, and so on. Mr. Warhol's first law states that it is possible to be famous for being famous. A corollary of this axiom is that you can often be interviewed simply because you are so often interviewed. Of the two media, radio and television, I prefer the latter. Even in real life, I tend to act out whatever I am saying. This habit is not only useless if no one can see me, it also lulls me into thinking that I am being more expressive than I am in audible terms. On television I feel free, but I rapidly learned to conceal my enthusiasm. The technicians despised me when they realized that I was enjoying myself. In a small way, being an interviewee is a craft. It certainly requires technique. It is essential to bear in mind that facial movements are exaggerated by photography. If you roll your eyes, they will step out of your skull and slide across the screen. On the other hand, the microphone bevels the edges of even the most articulate voice. You must therefore keep your features calm while charging your voice with melodramatic emphasis, a little like rubbing your head and petting your stomach at the same time. While performing this feat, you must try to remain aware which camera is watching you and also calculate how much of you it can see. If I did not think my hands were visible, I tried, which isn't easy, not to move them at all. I thought that viewers might be aware that some hidden gesture was being made, and might be distracted by trying to guess what it was. Even when you are sure that your hands can be seen, you have to remember to hold every gesture long enough for the camera to turn towards it and tell the world what it has seen. These seem to me to be the chief purely mechanical problems of being interviewed. The remaining difficulty lies in becoming aware, before your brief moment in the limelight is half over, what kind of reaction is expected of you. As I crossed the states, I became involved in every possible interpretation of my life: grave, flippant, political, psychological, religious. In the far West, I came face to face with Mr. Snyder. He is in the human document industry, so remembered anguish could not be shuffled off with a jolly laugh. With Mr. Cavett in New York, I was in the entertainment business. It was with him that I felt most at ease. He is working with and for his conscripted audience in the studio, and he sits beside rather than opposite you. He is your straight man, comic as opposed to bent, and he obligingly feeds you questions to which he already knows the punchlines. If your interrogator seems to have no definite method of conducting the dialogue, it may be necessary to treat the situation like a geography exam. Few of us have enough stamina to study the whole world, so we trust to luck. The night before our test, we take our atlas from its shelf, blow the telltale dust from the top of it, and open it at random. If the pages part at China, that is what we study. Of course, the next day we discover that the main question in our paper concerns France. Our answer begins, "France is not like China." Translated into television terms, this means that if you arrive at the studios with a wonderful anecdote about your mother, and some ill-briefed clot says, "How's your father?" you reply, "Father's worn out coping with my mother, who..." This would be described by a lawyer as converting public questions to private use. Another, by no means distasteful duty that I felt I owed to Mr. Elkins was to be photographed as often as possible. At a party given in honor of Miss Midler at the Waldorf Hotel, I was led across the room to meet her. We shook hands and exchanged a few gracious phrases to give the photographers time to gather round us. Then, standing as close to her as I dared, I turned towards the largest camera and smiled. Very quietly, Miss Midler whispered, "That's right, baby, do the whole bit." I have followed her instructions ever since. Whenever I become aware that I am being photographed, I give myself over to the occasion as completely as I can. I stand where I am told to stand. I try to look as I am required to look. As I am not paying for the results of all this attention, it seems the least I can do. Although it may be no such thing, I behave as though anyone's desire to take a picture of me is a compliment. Doing this is a politeness exactly parallel with giving my full attention to the kind remarks of strangers. For this reason, though I play up to the camera if I am given time, or I snapped unawares, I would never try to prevent an unflattering or even a ludicrous likeness of me being printed. I am not feverishly interested in the end product. Given a picture of myself, I would accept it, though I would not frame it or hang it on the wall. If I am not offered a print, I do not ask for one. This attitude is probably the result of having worked in art schools for so many years. When I first took up that profession, the model's lowly station in life debarred him from walking casually around the life room. I would never have been employed again in any establishment where I had made so bold as to stare critically at the drawings that were being made. Nowadays, there is no reason why models should not survey the paintings of students and even comment upon them. Democracy is here to stay. Nevertheless, old-timers seldom take advantage of the new regime. Others, apart from me, are aware that this is so. A short while ago, just before I gave up posing in art colleges, I was resting between sessions in one room when a model from another class came in and scrutinized the work in progress. After she had departed, the art master, in tones of glacial contempt, said, "The hallmark of an amateur." In spite of my indifference to the end product, I cannot help being aware that the Earth is now passing through the second photographic age. The first began just before or during the Great War, when the box camera, the Brownie, brought the taking of snapshots within reach of the middle classes, both financially and in terms of expertise. In that distant time, the criterion of a good photograph was simply that all the relevant subject matter was clearly recognizable. There was no nonsense about composition then. In fact, when I was young, photography was considered to be the enemy of art. Somebody once brought disgrace upon himself when he tried to show at the Royal Academy's summer exhibition a picture found by the judges to have been painted over a photographic background. Today, though it might be thought dull, this method of working would in no way be considered immoral. All students are encouraged to learn to use a camera properly. Firstly, because carrying small reproductions of their work is so much less burdensome than carting actual canvases to art galleries and advertising agencies. And secondly, so as to have something from which to work when the light on the landscape changes or a model drops dead. Today there is no opposition by art to photography. Cameras and artists' materials are equally aesthetic and equally expensive, but both have become the paraphernalia of a game any number can play. Though cameras are now far more sophisticated than formerly, they have passed through the phase when they were difficult to use and emerged into the common light of day almost amateur-proof. It is no longer miraculous to be able to make a visual record of a person or an event. We have moved on to a point at which the design and the lighting of a photograph come under perpetual discussion. Perhaps the notion that aesthetic values are involved helps to justify the financial outlay. I am only aware how universal the second photographic age has become because I am so often in the line of fire. This does not mean that my appearance has recently improved. It only signifies that I have become more notorious. At best, the reason for taking a picture of me is that it can be sold to a newspaper. At worst, it is proof that the person shown standing beside me has actually met me. In a copy of the Reader's Digest, I once read that the duck-billed platypus must eat twice its own weight in worms every day or it may die. The man who took the excellent picture of me used on the cover of the paperback edition of my autobiography was the platypus of the camera. He seemed to feel compelled daily to consume his own weight in celluloid. Since meeting him, I have come to realize that a great many photographers are obsessed with their occupation. They take pictures of everything. Presumably this is partly because, once again, cameras have become so easily portable. When I was a model, I was bewildered that the desire to paint overtook people who could have stayed in bed all day. But I saw that at least an artist has the pleasure of passing judgment on his environment, and, by distortion, ruling or even defeating it. Some would say he could not help doing this. The craze for photography is even more baffling. To invent a critical vision with the aid of a camera is much harder But having recently stood before a great many photographers, even going as high as Mr. Scavulo, I have become dimly aware that they too are converting me to their own use, that deep down I am only a sentence, perhaps a mere comma, in the forever unfinished essay that each of them is writing about the visible world. It is hardly surprising that, by some means or other, each man is trying to record his personal view of the universe. What is amazing is that nations do the same thing. There are national styles in photography. When in England I return at nightfall to my room, I turn on my television set without the sound. While I make my lumpy tea and green toast, I glance from time to time at the screen. When the image is American, even if it is only of a blade of grass, I know this immediately. The outline is clearer, the contrast between light and dark is stronger, and the object looks more worth the money. I wonder if American photographers are redeeming my image in the same way. The first time that I actually went on an American stage and addressed a paying audience was in New Haven, at the smaller of the two Long Wharf theaters. Someone had told me that this was where the plays of Mr. O'Neill were originally performed. Perhaps because so many of his words have a nautical theme, I imagined that to reach the auditorium, the public would be compelled to walk along a booming wooden veranda beneath dangerously swinging hurricane lamps, and that the stalls would smell of dead fish. I now saw that the two theaters and sundry other buildings were welded into a concrete structure that formed one boundary of a huge meat market. On the other side was a Howard Johnson hotel where I stayed. From the window of my room, while I put on my stage clothes, I could watch people arriving, sometimes at my theater, but more often at the larger one, where Journey's End was being performed. Both the Long Wharf theaters were run by a small staff of very young people, who mercifully displayed the minimum of artiness, and who were very friendly. Sometimes they and other total strangers took me round New Haven. Wherever we went, apologies were offered for the provinciality of the environment. Had no one mentioned it, I would never have noticed. There, as everywhere I went in America, I invested everything I saw with the wonder I felt at being there at all. New Haven is a university town, but unlike Oxford, not affectedly so. For the most part, the colleges are tactfully woven in with the surrounding architecture, and the students do not look conspicuously different from real people. I went to Yale on 2 occasions, once at the invitation of a member of the staff, and again because a rogue student asked me. On both days I was far out of my depth, but remained precariously afloat on a tide of American courtesy. On my second visit, I found myself among the divinity students to whom I was required to explain you-know-who. I began to comply with this request in a very shaky voice, but soon found that, though my audience was lively, it was not disputatious. In the United States, the vocabulary of undergraduates is not ostentatiously polysyllabic, nor is their discourse seasoned to choking point with obscure quotations. From this entire escapade I conclude that it is the practice of American universities, deliberately, but in small doses, to expose their inmates to the more bizarre aspects of the outer world. Experience is evidently thought to be more fortifying than mere learning. At all first nights staged by Mr. Elkins, the audience is as much under his control as the actors. The theater is full of smiling faces, clapping hands. This is part of his method of presentation. He also carries with him on such occasions a file for beveling the nails of critics. I could not, therefore, at first be sure how I was being received by America. But as my 2 weeks in New Haven wore on, I began to assume a certain reciprocity in my audiences. I am not saying that every word I uttered was given a totally favorable reception, but except by the gay papers, I was seldom savaged. From New Haven I went to Washington and New York. There I stayed in the Algonquin Hotel, a deliberately and very charmingly old-fashioned establishment run less for profit than as a shrine sacred to the memory of that far-off time when Dorothy Parker was alive and bitching. During my stay there, one of her contemporaries, Mr. Connolly, was brought back from the dead to be interviewed in that very room where once stood the round table at which they sat. The first question asked of him was, "Do you think that conversation is as witty now as it was in the good old days?" He replied, "Mine is." All right, that 40 minutes is the first half of the America chapter. And I'll continue this once I've had a good lie down. Thank you for listening.